Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fifth edition in the series between the HR Tech Partnership and the Future of Work. My name's Sharon Sagu, and we're pleased to have you joining us this lunchtime. For those of you who are new to joining us, this is a discussion about AI and technology and how we can facilitate various people management strategies. We're delighted to be joined by three panelists today. We have Priya Srinivasan, the HR Director for Developing Markets for Reckitt Benckiser. We have David Barrett, the Chief Commercial Officer for AON Assessment Solutions. And of course, we have Devyani Vaishampayam, the Managing Director of HR Tech Partnership. Devyani's held a significant amount of senior HR roles across a number of FTSE 100 companies. So welcome to David, Priya, and Devyani. Just to mention, there is the facility to ask questions, so please do ask any questions you want. We will field these at the end of the webinar. And without further ado, we'd like to start the webinar. I'd like to hand over to Devyani to really set the scene for us this morning.
Thanks, Sharon. So managing change is not new for many organizations. But I think what's significant right now because of the crisis is not just that all organizations have to deal with it, but I think the scale, the speed, and the agility with which organizations need to respond is very different. Now, this is a very broad topic, and it can mean different things to different people. So today, I think we will focus on the facets that cover operating model and how that's changing and how do you manage it, but also employee engagement, collaboration, and the skills and capabilities that need to be ramped up given the changing scenario. And finally, I guess the key question in any change and transformation is how do you foster mindset change? How do you improve trust? But also, I think, given the current challenges of remote working, how do you facilitate and help leadership be more authentic? Now, AI solutions can be very useful, not just because they're cost effective, but the fact that you can personalize an employee experience, and an organization has the ability to have real-time insights into what's going on makes it particularly relevant.
Thank you, Devyani. Some really great thoughts. So if we go to our panel now, I'd like to ask David. David, what is it that you're seeing your clients using in the way of AI and digital around change?
Thanks for the question, Sharon. I think what we see above all else is that over the last 5 years, out of our thousands of clients, all of them have been paying some kind of lip service to the development of models about digital readiness, moving to agile, future state versus current state. And they had undertaken a lot of preliminary tasks about implementation of what this might look like in terms of ways of working, remote working, virtual working, collaboration outside of being in the office, or jobs changing around customer centricity models to be more digitally driven. And every people leader worth their salt was involved in these kind of projects, but they've accelerated monumentally now because of the impact of COVID. So, for example, where we would have had a lot of projects where we're using AI to look at, let's say, which jobs are suited to doing remotely because of the tasks they have versus need to be done on site, or which can be augmented or automated by digital technologies, or be done by a person in a different way because it's a virtual environment as opposed to physical. There's a lot of modeling going on, a lot of looking at which jobs were in the sunset versus the sunshine, looking at what kind of upskilling or retraining might be needed to get people to be able to operate in those interfaces or to manage people in those settings. What's happened is that AI was present and available, the analytics tool to measure individual people, to measure organizations, to analyze roles and look at job neighborhoods and families and how you'd optimize your workforce for the future. With many of our clients, particularly banks and telecom companies, they've now gone from maybe 20 kilometers an hour to 100 kilometers an hour about implementation, because they have wealth managers working from home, engineers solving networks virtually, delivering new customer propositions online, new delivery mechanisms for moving physical products or documents. And I don't think that now they will go back to old ways of operating. So what's happening is that they're looking at all the behavioral skill sets, the functional skill sets, the cognitive and attitudinal attributes that are needed to do the jobs. And all of the projects that we had aspired to do and already had a good business case from half a decade ago, they're now all doing them because of the cash conservation and preservation modality they're in, and how to return to work in a cost-efficient way, but deliver great experience to their internal and external customers. So it's a very sad and problematic situation for many of our clients, but it's leading to rapid innovation and creative destruction, which is good in terms of the business case, just obviously can be quite traumatic.
Sure. Thanks, David. No, really interesting to see, you get that perspective across a range of clients. So really interesting. Priya, if I just move to you, what is it that you're currently seeing in the way of AI and digital around change?
Thank you, Sharon and David. It was great to hear from you. So I have to echo a lot of what David is saying is ringing true in our organization and our lives as well. And the way I'm looking at it is like life pre and post COVID is like day and night. It's like the BC and the AD of modern day, because life will never be the same again. And I think a lot of what has made it palatable is the prevalence of digital solutions to help us navigate this world. So that's really what we're seeing. And, just overnight, frankly, some of the most ancient professions are the bastions of the way things work, which is getting a medical diagnosis or New York Stock Exchange closing and going online. These are things that have actually happened, and it's ringing true in our organization as well. So what we are seeing is our organization, and I used to work with pharma before, really believed in collaboration through being together. So in R&D science, you really exchange ideas by being together. And in Reckitt Benckiser also, we actually make decisions being together. And so culturally, there's a lot of flexible working around the fringes, but the way business gets run is together. And overnight, this company, which was quite not using collaboration tools like Yammer and so on, we had to kind of get into moving to an online way of working. And so we evolved from Skype to Microsoft Teams, started collaborating, and frankly, it just worked. Everyone was very worried. This is not us, this is not how we work. And it just happened overnight. And, we're collaborating more. The technology didn't let us down. People are working harder than ever. And I'm hearing this across different industries. So what I learned from that process is that what's been holding us back, a little bit like the point David was making, was actually two things: our own mindset and trust. Mm-hmm. And trust in trust in our systems to work, trust in our people, our beliefs that things are not going to happen. And actually, this has gotten a lot of people who've been on the other side of the fence or sitting in the fence about the possibilities of digital, the possibilities of what technology can bring, AI being one of them. Everybody is in a new baseline of belief and understanding. And so if there's one message I would leave, or which has been reflecting, is there is never a more fertile moment or a time where the timing is right for any great technology or any great product that can truly make a difference for the people to adopt this. Now's the moment. So this is actually a brilliant, there are lots of not so nice things that have come out of this moment, but I think this is a pretty awesome moment for a digital era.
Fantastic. Thanks, Priya. Some really great observations from both of you. So we can see there have been some level of digital solutions, but if we think about adoption in the next 6 to 18 months, and I'd like to ask David, if I may, what is it that you're currently expecting to see your clients doing differently in terms of AI around change?
Well, I think if we focus in maybe on HR and talent for a moment as well, because we're in that professional space with most of our audience here today, is that, well, what we can see like straight off is that we have a number of big financial services clients who will say we're already running processes to see could they get people in their financial sales and their wealth advisory and private banking to work more remotely, virtualized environments with customers and colleagues and product, and less driving around in a car or going around in a train or an airplane in order to do their work. So we were already running all these projects to evaluate people's level of curiosity, adaptability, learnability, agility, these things that look at their willingness to take on new modalities of work, and then correlating in that and looking at about customer net performer or net promoter scores, revenue created, et cetera, et cetera. These projects, I think, are just going to accelerate into lots of other areas of work. You know, we were working with JP Morgan Chase around moving to Agile, around getting their tech stack to move from waterfall cascade into Agile ways of working. You know, those projects will transform into virtual ways of working and combined with Agile, to do with remote, virtual, Agile. And I think what you'll have is leaders in the HR space who are looking at not just strategies to do with people, but maybe location strategies, reward strategies, locations that you deliver things from, where teams are set up to do things. They'll all start to look at this lens of how you can look at anything from IT delivery to customer service to sales to logistics to R&D. And they look to see initially under a cash conservation lens, which jobs need to be present now and to do what. And then they look at, I think, how they can then work against new metrics around efficiency, customer delight, performance. And they look at that through a lens of location strategy and cost of physical infrastructure and presence. Like even a real simple thing to even give you an example of at the moment is with all of our clients that we're doing stuff around virtual internship assessment centers or virtual assessment centers for graduates in campus. Hundreds of them just put all these things up into online virtual platforms with our platforms to do group assessment technology, two-way videoing, all simulations, case studies, psychometrics. They ran all the processes with good business continuity. Some of them took out millions of dollars of costs. Like if you look at Citibank, for example, they actually are putting 2,000 internships into virtual format this summer instead of having them on site. And they've made a commitment to hire all these people for their talent supply, but they'll just need different ways of how to do some diagnostic feedback advisory with them. I don't know the dollars and cents makeup of that, but you'd imagine that type of a shift could very well sustain itself into the future about lots of stuff to do with talent development and acquisition, because a lot of money gets spent on physical activity that mightn't really be at the heart of where the value was in the first place.
Sure, fantastic examples, David. Thank you for sharing those. I'd just like to move to Priya, actually. Same question, Priya. What is it that you're seeing yourself doing differently in terms of AI around change?
David, thank you. Those were great examples. And every time I think of these situations, and every day you have a new problem, actually, it's quite new for all of us. And it just makes me also wonder what we were doing all this time, because we were sitting on a lot of opportunity, but we chose to keep working in the way we used to work. And I guess that for us, the biggest shift or what's really happened is digital technologies were always there, but I think the organization's preoccupation was largely in terms of how to digitize the relationship between us and our customers, between us and our consumers. So that was the preoccupation, to say, how do we drive our business? But now, overnight, we've had to find a way to digitize the relationship between the organization and the employees. So that's a new dimension which has just come in literally overnight. And so there's several, again, the fence sitters are pulling more questions rather than having stuff pushed at them. But we are going through, in the organization I work for, we're going through a huge strategic refresh. We are having a huge organizational transformation as we speak. So we're creating these new business units. The business units need to learn about the global footprint that they are responsible for. And what would we have done pre-COVID? Travel, get on a plane and get all over the world. And the question now is, we still have a job to do. We still have employees wondering how this organization is going to actually evolve. And we've got to find a way in which we educate ourselves as well as engage with our employees, drive performance virtually. And so we've started to think about what might be the creative ways. So when we travel, we do site visits, we go to a factory, we go meet customers, we go to a store visit. How do we get all of that done virtually? So one of the ideas we are at the moment exploring literally this week is a virtual site visit. So using virtual reality with an overlay of a combination of a Zoom and a Teams meeting to start having a bit more engaging conversations, but to educate ourselves, but also deliver the old objective in a new way. So there's a big space on that. The other, some of the things we've already started doing is virtual onboarding and induction. And onboarding is almost like a difficult word in any large corporation. How to get the computer on time, some of that, like with the right software, but as much as the induction program. And I was just talking to one of our team leaders, and he said, "Oh, we've started recording all our inducts. So we get one killer induction because everybody's online anyway. We're recording it so people can go through it. And what we've now we're complementing it with is much more interactive, frequent check-ins to say, what are your questions? So it's much more engaging. So you do the structured bit in your own time, and then you engage. And so this is simple, but like we were doing it in a different way. And so, but the thing that's actually the biggest point that we're starting to think about is employee engagement. You know, when you're seeing your employees more frequently, you roughly know what's going on and you know where the pulse is, and then you can do your engagement. But how do we really get a feel of the pulse? How do teams work effectively? So we've started trying to find ways in which we have more frequent surveyed check-ins, more insights crystallized, and therefore, what are the actions we can take? So there's several questions, Sharon, actually, that we're trying to answer. Many of which we're trying to get creative with solutions, but I think that there's many more to come. So that's one spot. And the other is, which we actually even began pre-COVID, but it's very important, is upskilling our own employees. Sure. So how do we equip our organization to be ready and to be ever so ready or ahead of the curve in understanding this whole, the way the world's evolving? And we've invested actually quite a bit as a company on digital training, right from the basics of, internet jargon to analytics, and how do you look at big data and social marketing. So there's a lot of education I think you'll see happening, and we started doing it, but it hasn't even, it's like that 30 miles per hour to the 100 miles per hour example of David. We just need to double down. So it's very exciting. There's a lot to be done, and we just have to prioritize what are the most important things in the near term.
Thank you, Priya. So some quite similar themes coming from yourself and David with the virtual onboarding. And there's been a lot in the press about your factories in China, how quickly they're adapting, to what's going on. So thank you for that. But I'd just like to bring Devyani into the conversation, if I may. Devyani, I think it would be really interesting for everybody who's listening at home if you could share some insight on solutions that you see coming out in this space.
Right. So I think if you look at change and transformation, the typical model for many large corporates used to be to have large-scale 2 to 3 year programs, but also extensively use external consultants. And the use of technology has to date been fairly limited, which is more around modeling, costs, project management. But I do think over the next 6 to 18 months, you're going to see quite a few big shifts and a few areas specifically. I think agile workforce planning, and I think David referred to that in terms of job skills, tasks which could be automated, but also looking at efficiencies, trying to incorporate remote working. This is going to be a big priority, and there are great AI and digital solutions that can help you with specifics. The second area is, again, I think everyone referred to mindset change and engagement. This is where what AI platforms provide is the ability to nudge, to reward, to personalize content, but also for the organization to get real-time insights. So I think Priya referred to surveys. This is really the next stage from doing surveys then. Transformation of skills and capabilities again has come up in the discussion, and the speed, but also I think the difference I'm seeing, and let me give you a recent example of with the president of an oil and gas business, where now the business strategy is going to be very strongly linked to digital. So digital skills is no longer something a small group of people need to have. I think every employee in the organization needs to be upskilled. And how do you do that when you're under cost pressures, when you don't have time and employees are working remotely? So I think the capabilities and upskilling and using AI solutions to upskill is going to definitely increase. And then lastly, I think there is so much information available today through chat, through emails, through collaboration tools, and the ability of the organization to tap into that through using organization network analysis can really help it in being proactive. Again, going back to what do you Priya was saying, what do you prioritize? How do you figure out what's important? This could be a great way, and this uses AI and machine learning. So I think if I were to summarize the technologies, sophisticated bot communication is going to become more prevalent. I think what you're seeing in many HR teams using is basic bots, but I think the next step is a more sophisticated use. Gamification is a great way to get employees, especially around mindset and behavior. This can be a great tool to get engagement, but also to get commitment to some long-lasting change. And then I think augmented reality, again, we've had examples. Augmented reality is going to be used far more frequently. Apart from virtual visits, I think it's a great way for for leaders to really role model behaviors, to understand before they actually go out and do something. So I think a quick snapshot, again, as I said, it's a big area, but clearly a lot of possibilities.
Thank you, Devyani. And, it seems that the three of you, the whole panel has come up with a lot of options right now that people listening to at home could try. But obviously, with the increased pressure on budgets and, the cost climate, given what it is, building business cases could be tricky. So I'd just like to go over to David, see if he can share any thoughts or tips on building business cases for these types of initiatives.
Yeah, and I'd just like to go back to where Priya was speaking around, around some of the speeding up as well. And I think it's probably, if it wasn't so serious, it would be hilarious. But like, obviously, I sit on the sell side of the fence, usually as a kind of a commercial leader, developing the proposition solutions and the business cases. And Priya is probably more on the buy side, leading out big initiatives within a corporation. I suppose that the business cases for these things were always immensely powerful. Like if you could say, well, I can run all my talent development programs and leadership development and talent acquisition and take out $10 million of cost, that was always probably a good business case by using smart AI to look at people's backgrounds, bioinformation, psychometric stuff, skills. But it was always to do with the change. It was always to do with how would I get people to adopt this, because the burning platform mightn't have been as bright as maybe some of the other things that the organizations were focused on. So for example, if we take things like what we look at the moment, is that the business case around cost is usually quite easy, because you're looking at being able to reduce travel, logistics, transport, time that people spend doing something. And the replacement or augmentation or automation through a technology, as long as it's of good quality, is almost inevitably less expensive and probably faster. So the cost piece usually isn't, a cost business case is usually easy. Because the capex will be low to set up these technologies usually in comparison to historical ways of working. The bit about getting people to adopt things is really the big challenge, because, and this relates to what Devyani was saying, that if you want people to adopt things, you need to keep them relatively simple. So like, for example, if you look at, I think we're on a Zoom technology today. Zoom would typically not have been acceptable and is challenged in a lot of corporations still around things to do with how does it stack up against Citrix, Cisco, Teams, WebEx, around some of its corporate level infrastructure. But Zoom's is super popular because it is so easy and enjoyed by many people who happen to be business leaders and their kids. And it has exploded in its usefulness because it was simple to use, and it had things like all the multi-panel thing on the screen, and it's interesting as a user interface. So there's things like gamification and augmented reality, and being able to have things as chat-based environments that are online. They emulate what people liked about things like their iPhones anyhow, and what they use in consumer tech. And if you want to have success on these change things, you need high conversion, high participation rates of people actively wanting to switch. And that is really key then to the sustainability about anything for the future. Because the cost thing will only get you so far. You can't cut your way out of things forever. You have to have some inspiration there around, like, why is this now beautiful or interesting or enjoyable? And then I'd finish with saying we have like big box retailers selling furniture to luxury goods companies selling fancy handbags, for example. They all knew they should have been using their stores as the supply chain to do in 1 hour deliveries in large metro areas. And we were working with them around developing digital e-commerce managers for geography as opposed to store managers. I had been barking at them, jumping up and down, doing somersaults for the last 5 years, trying to get them to do it. Now they're all doing it, not because of me. They're doing it because of COVID-19. But I'm delighted they're doing it. But the key bit in the middle is what Devyani was on about. You have to have high conversion, high participation. It has to be enjoyable, and it has to be beautiful if possible. Cost is great to get going, but there has to be adoption, and then there has to be productivity. I'll stop now. I know I'm going on a bit. Sorry.
Thank you, David. No, some really key points. We appreciate those. Priya, just conscious of time, so briefly, do you have any quick tips for building business cases?
Yes. So I think I would really echo what David's saying. So from our perspective, it would be really clear what is the problem you're solving. And I think we're at a moment where people are much more sharper in their understanding and much more open. So I think doing the groundwork to understand what is the problem. Sometimes people don't know there's a solution to some of the problems that they know exist. And so articulating exactly what is the problem we're solving is probably very important. Beyond just the cost and everything from a return on investment, I think what organizations are looking at this point is it simple? Is it making my employees' life better, more effective, making them more productive, or using less time to do the same activity? Is it helping in some way make my rather big and clunky systems be better? So is it an adding complexity or adding simplicity to the broader infrastructure problem that organizations have? And I think at the end of the day, if you've got all of that sorted out, you will get to a pretty good answer, because I think organizations are very hungry at this point to have good digital solutions. So never before has there been such a time.
Thank you, Priya. And briefly, Devyani, can I just ask you to build on some of those ideas?
So I think I just wanted to say, the Human Capital Digital Innovation Hub we've set up really addresses the issues that Priya and David have raised in terms of it allows you to pilot something, so you don't have to make any big commitment. But I think the point Priya made about, I think very few HR leaders are fully aware of what's possible. And because we have a great set of curated solutions, we can pinpoint a specific issue, we can source the right solution for you, we can handhold you, and you have a chance to first experiment and see something without committing to any big budget decisions then. And we do it across the entire life cycle, employee life cycle. So your problem could be in any part of the employee life cycle.
Thanks, Devyani. Really good. Look, we're coming up to time. There is one stream of questions that's come across a really similar field. So I'm just going to throw it out there to Priya or David. There's a couple of questions that they're saying. Are there any tips to convince employees who may not feel comfortable using tech solutions? So very briefly, any kind of tips on making people feel more comfortable?
I'm happy to give that a try.
Great.
What I've seen is, I think actually pilots work. So
Sure.
trying small, but trying in an important area. So what we've had some examples where you don't want to get some of the non-believers, you don't want them to come kicking and screaming, but when they see it work and they see it work well, I think that's the best tip I can give.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I'm just conscious that we're kind of coming to the end of the time. So I won't read out the key takeaways, but I will put them up there for you. I will have to close because we're coming to the end of the time. But I think the main thing is that, as Priya just mentioned, start small, deliver early incremental success, and pilot to allow, stakeholders to really feel comfortable with these different solutions you're trying. But I wanted to say thank you to David, Priya, and Devyani for some really interesting insights and for joining us today. And thank you for everybody at home for taking the time to listen to us. We look forward to having you next time when we discuss employee compensation. But for now, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right.